Welcome to Light It Up, a podcast about resilient women balancing motherhood, their careers, personal lives, and all of the challenges that come along with being a superwoman. Each week, you'll be motivated to take action to lead, inspire, transform, and empower. Now, here's your host, Dr. Aginah Musherah. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Light It Up. I am your host, Dr. Aginah Musherah. I want to thank you for taking time to tune in today. As we're continuing the conversation about Black fatherhood, and so if you've tuned in last week, you were able to see the first segment of a 3-part series about fatherhood. And today I have the honor of having a very good friend of mine to join us on Light It Up. I have Eugene Muhammad, who is the father of 6 children. I'll give all of his credentials later, but has decided to grace us with his presence so he could share some of his experiences as a father of, that's right, 6 children. Welcome, Eugene. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine, Dr. Muhammad. It's so great to be here, and thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And I guess I should also, full disclaimer, we are not related, although we do bear the same last name, but no, we are not related to each other.
Yeah.
But just to give the audience a little bit of your background, you are from Chicago, born and raised.
Outside.
Yes, Southside. Also a graduate of Whitney Young High School.
Dolphins, right?
Yes.
92.
Free going on. You know, I'm from Morgan Park, the Mighty Mustangs.
Mustangs, gotta have love. As a Southsider, I gotta have love for my Mustangs. So
Hey,
I almost, and one of my kids is actually a Mustang. So yeah, I got love for
oh,
yeah.
that okay.
Academic Center.
That's
At,
good.
yeah.
All right, I'm a product of the Academic Center, just in case
All
you
right.
don't know. And you are also a Morehouse man, and you know how everyone goes crazy about those Morehouse men. So
The house, right?
Morehouse College. Um, and your major was psychology.
Yeah.
However, you developed a passion for religion and, of course, philosophy because you are also on faculty at Triton College, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
you teach philosophy, so I don't know if anybody wants to get into any type of philosophical debate with you.
I'm actually a very pleasant interlocutor. So most people enjoy conversations with me.
All right, I see your hat there. Got
Right. Yes. I'm, I'm always, gang banging for philosophy. And I think it should be a thing. I think we should make, it a thing, right?
I I agree. Just a little bit of a twist to, I am interviewing fathers, all of the great fathers that I know. And I think we kind of talked about this because I said I'm interviewing single fathers, and we were getting ready to get into a philosophical debate about the term single. Um,
Yeah.
and we didn't. We kind of cut that short, but I did ask you to come on because, as I mentioned previously, you are the father of 6. Um, you are also, and you're very involved in your children's lives. And I wanted to talk to you just to get your perspective and your insight on, your role as a father, um, and how you kind of develop the type of relationship that you have with your children. And I do know that you were married or you're currently separated.
Right.
I don't know if you want to talk about that, but that's what places you,
That's right.
I guess, in the criteria or the category of, as I deem it, single dad. So that's how.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I'm legally married, but I'm separated, have been separated for some time. And we actually co-parent very well.
Mhm. And I think that is also something that's very important that I want us to be able to kind of delve into, because for, so many parents who are, they have two separate households, co-parenting can sometimes be a bit of a challenge. But before we get into that, I'm going to open up the floor for you to kind of, share a little bit more about yourself and, your family. So.
Well, I started my family when I was down at Morehouse, and I got married, and then my family began to grow, and more people came into my life, eating up all my food and things like that. But again, I've always welcomed being a father. Um, and that had a lot to do with my acceptance of Islam. Islam was a tremendous factor in terms of building capacity for me to accept that kind of responsibility at such a young age. I was 19, and I welcome the challenge of taking responsibility for a family and children. And so that was a major transition in my life, and so much has changed. But nevertheless, I think that particularly the Nation of Islam, accepting Islam via the Nation of Islam, really played a tremendous part in my being open to starting a family so young. And as young Muslims, again, we got married, and our family began to grow. And I felt like the kind of father that I needed to become was a duty not just to my people, but also a duty to God, right? It was a part of the pious understanding of what it means to be a Muslim man.
Mhm.
And so all of that sort of informed the kind of father I was attempting to be. Now, it didn't work out for me. A lot of what we were taught in the nation in terms of the kinds of men we should be and kind of father we should be, it wasn't for me. And I grew into that understanding that it's not a cookie cutter model,
Mhm.
although some of the principles are still there. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So let me ask you, because I'm just curious, did growing up, so before accepting Islam, and we can kind of talk about that as well. But growing up, did you grow up in a two-parent household?
I did not have my biological father. However, I did later have a stepfather who was awesome.
Mhm.
Um, and he was just a very loving and humble brother. And he just, for me, exemplified loving strength. He was a quiet man, but I remember I used to watch him eat dinner, a little something subtle like that, and
Yeah.
he would make a muscle when he would like bring the fork to and I would be like, man, I want my muscles to be like that. Little things like that as a young boy, I can recall, but he was so awesome.
Mhm.
And I was very fortunate to have him in my life. And so I had him most of my life. And then, of course, my little sister came
Mhm.
and started taking up, Christmas, which was a problem. I'll have to talk to her about that. But yeah, and then, years later, many years later, he and my mom split and they divorced. But by then I was an adult. So, yes, I did have my stepfather in my life, and that was very instrumental in terms of um, one, my recognizing the import of having a man as a young man, and as young girls need to have in their lives. That I knew early on that was very important.
Excellent, excellent. And so 19 years old, you're down at Morehouse College. Now, had you already converted to Islam when before you got to Morehouse?
No, actually, I was searching. I was studying everything. I was studying the 5% Nation of Gods and Earths. I was studying the Hebrew Israelites. I was studying everything that, and Atlanta. Oh my God, it was a beautiful and wonderful place to to have such a search because everyone had converged onto Atlanta in the 90s, and so you can go to 5 Points
Mhm.
and all the brothers would be down there debating. It was just so awesome. And then, of course, you would be on Morehouse campus. And I was blessed to be there with Dr. Wesley Muhammad, and he'd be out there debating when he was just Brother Wesley X back then.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it was just a wonderful time to have that kind of journey. And eventually, I decided to pursue the Nation of Islam after I had looked at a variety of paths.
Okay. So, as a young college student and then a young married couple, what were some of the challenges of now becoming a parent?
Being poor, being broke. Oh, it was terrible. She and I joke about that even to this day. It was terrible. Everywhere I went, I just remember sweating because I was on the bus everywhere I went in Atlanta.
Mhm.
Um, and the MARTA, the MARTA's not like the CTA. So
Mhm.
they shut down after a certain time. And I remember I had a job as a security guard,
Mhm.
and sometimes I would oversleep and I would have to get to my post, and the buses stopped running, and and I got to give a shout out to Brother Burvey Muhammad was my roommate, and there were a couple of times I hated this. I would have to wake him up like, brother, can you please take me to my job? And I remember one time he was like, bro, I'm not taking you to your job no more. You better wake your butt up.
Burvey saying that to you. Such
Yes. Yeah. Very, very stern, very lovingly, but stern nevertheless, right?
exactly. You had to grow up pretty quickly, though, in terms of the responsibilities, obviously, of being a father. So, how old is your oldest?
My oldest is 26.
26. And
Yeah.
let me just make a quick point here. I actually had both of your sons on the show first. So before
That's
you,
right.
because they
That's right.
were part of the Black Male Educator series that aired over the summer.
Right. That's right. Yep.
Eugene and Eugene, because you got that George Foreman.
See, that's what happened with young fathers. You get influence from some very interesting sources. So George Foreman was an inspiration. So yes, Eugene Khalil and Eugene Jamil. Yes.
So 20, so that means that you yeah, so 26 years of
Mhm.
parenting, and you have four sons, two daughters. What's the
Yep.
is that the configuration?
Yep.
Wow. Okay. So you really can give us some pointers on parenting then.
A
Um,
lot of mistakes made, right? A lot of lessons from a lot of mistakes.
what has been I think what has been the greatest, I guess, challenge that you've experienced with fatherhood, with parenting?
Well, we were brought up with very authoritarian models of parenting.
Mhm.
And that was the one of the first things I had to jettison immediately. That wasn't me.
Mhm.
I'm not a dictatorial leader. I'm a very um, empowering leader. That's just my natural model. And I had to allow that natural disposition to permeate my parenting style. When I was a young Muslim, I was crazy. I was walking around, I'm a man, I'm the man. And it's just that never worked for me. I just am not that kind of dude.
Mhm.
And I had to get very comfortable into my own parenting style. So my eldest son, who is, I tell people this, I don't look up to a lot of men. You have to really earn that kind of respect from me. And of the few men that I genuinely respect, my sons
Mhm.
are numbered in that very short list
Mhm.
because of the kind of men that they are naturally. And I don't say that it's me. And I think it's a very parenting can, and especially being a father, a very humbling service position because I look at them sometimes, my children, they surprise me. They're much braver than I was when I was their age. They're much stronger. They're much fearless.
Mhm.
And you can't help but to say all praise is due to God for that because that's not me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow. And I noticed also just in talking to Eugene Khalil and Eugene Jamil that they both also walked in your foot. I'm going to say walked in your footsteps. They also attended and graduated from Morehouse.
Yes.
Haters just like you. Um, and when I interviewed them, I asked them, you know, who do you look up to? Who's been your greatest inspiration? And of course they named their father, they named their mother as well, but there was also a very short list of people, that they looked up to or admired or respected in terms of helping to shape them into the men that they are today.
Yeah.
And if I don't tell you, or if I haven't told you before, which I think that I have, but I think you all have done a great job with them. I mean,
All praise to
you know,
God.
and I also think that any student would be lucky actually to have them as a teacher in the classroom.
Yeah.
So I've been watching them.
And I have to say something about this because um, them being interested in this, and this speaks to the kind of parenting I had to sort of embrace with them, because some personalities, the more you push in one direction, they'll go in the opposite direction because that's the kind of personality that they have. And when you have strong personalities in young people, it's foolish to then try to bump chests and then have this contentious relationship. And I had to learn early on, especially with my elder children, um, is to let go, let them make mistakes, let them fail. This was the most difficult thing I've had. I had to allow my children to fail at things. And that was very painful because as parents, as mothers and fathers, we don't want to see our children endure the pain of failure.
Right.
And there was some very painful lessons in that. And my sons and I, we talked about, especially my elder kids, because it was the first time I had to face this.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, with subsequent children, you know what to do. You can just sit back and say, okay, you'll get through this. Trust me, I've seen this before. But the first two times maybe you're looking at this, it's very difficult. Especially with your partner as you're sitting here, because I could say this: my wife at the time,
Mm-hmm.
she could not understand what I was saying. I said, "You have to let him fail.
Mm-hmm.
He has to do this on his own. This is his personality, and I know he's not going to be successful. We know, but he has to do it on his own." And my ex, oh, she was like, what are you talking about, brother? You've been eating too much bean pie. I don't know what else. What's in that tea you've been drinking? Um, but eventually we came to realize that was something, and even the choice of Morehouse was something that they decided. When Barack Obama had given the graduation speech at Morehouse. He spoke at the commencement, and the magazine came in the mail because I'm an alum.
Mm-hmm.
And my sons looked at it and they came to me and basically confronted me and said, "Why haven't you taught us about Morehouse?"
Wow.
And I'm like, huh. And I looked at the picture of all those brothers,
Mm-hmm.
in the maroon with the ties and I looked at my sons, I looked back down, and I said, "Oh my God, I could see it.
Mm-hmm.
You all are Morehouse men. Why didn't I try to start this kind of, legacy with you all?" But I was not thinking about that because I didn't want to impose it, but they wanted it. And I was 100% behind them after, again, they brought that to me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Now, what's the age range? Because I didn't. So the oldest is 26.
Yeah, 26, 24, 22, 21, 18, and 17. No, 19 and 17. I have to remember because they do change every year.
Everybody is essentially 2 years apart, with the exception of the third and the fourth child, who are a year.
Yes. Yeah.
For some busy folks.
Yes. We were trying to be fruitful and multiply, like the Bible said. No.
That's a lot of mouths to feed. All right. Well, I only have 3, so I can't compete.
Hey, 3. That's still a lot.
Okay.
'Cause
I,
3. Come on now, Muhammad. Muhammad.
I had twins now. I'm a little bit of an over.
See, okay. You cheated. You cheated on that one. Okay.
And honestly, I was pregnant with triplets.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Pregnant with triplets and lost one early on. So
okay.
Been one and done.
Wow. That's all. Now, do triplets and twins run in your family?
That's a whole nother conversation.
No. Okay. Okay. All right.
We'll have to talk about that.
You have to do a podcast on that. You're gonna have to do a podcast on it.
Yes. Well, actually, I talk about it in my book, Women Who Persevere.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I read that part.
You got to read that part.
I read the book. Yeah, I got the book.
Yeah, I know. It's like the second or third chapter, I think it is.
Okay.
But yeah, but I am going to talk about it. Actually, that is going to be an episode about experiencing multiples and the challenges with that. So yeah.
Yes.
There was something that you mentioned when you were talking about, letting your child fail, right? And how you were willing to just kind of sit back, because you've seen this before with a certain situation, whereas your partner, your was like, no, wanted to respond differently.
Right.
Let's talk about the I guess the differences in how mothers and fathers parent. I was actually on, my brother interviewed me. We had a live show on Wednesday on the Eugene Muhammad show. And that we kind of touched upon, how fathers parent a certain way. Obviously mothers are nurturing, and one of the challenges that will come along, even if you are married or if you're, divorced, single, separated, what have you, but you're co-parenting, is where one parent has an expectation of the other parent in terms of their parenting style, right? So sometimes as women, we may want that father to parent the child a certain way.
That's right.
Can you talk about that? What do you think is the reason behind that, in terms of where, one person may have a certain expectation of the other, and not really giving the other parent the freedom to parent as they deem necessary or appropriate?
It's an excellent and powerful question, because I had to struggle with that, because there are, especially as a Muslim man, there were expectations of me as a man and a father, and I'm a naturally nurturing leader, father, educator. So everything that I am, what I bring is this kind of nurturing disposition. So it's very natural, and sometimes our partners may not have that, regardless of gender or biological sex. They may not be as nurturing. And so when we appeal to these tropes, these sociological tropes of like, oh, mothers are nurturing and fathers are more, disciplinarian in their approach, I think we set ourselves up for missing out on those opportunities that you just raised in your question. And I think I did experience that. One of the things that I nurture, because we nurture differently. We both nurture, we just nurture differently. One of the things that I am intentional about nurturing is, one, being just in how I approach you and deal with you. Just because I have power over you does not mean I could do or say anything I want to you. Now that has been a guiding principle in my orientation to fathering. So I will listen to young people and hear their side when many will tell me you don't listen to children. And I was like, yes, I do, absolutely, because I don't want to commit an injustice with them just because I have power. And so I think that's something that would later be a benefit in terms of um, fostering positive and healthy relationships with young people as they grow into young adults. I think some of the more difficult times that mothers often have is transitioning from childhood, teenage to young adulthood.
Yeah.
And sometimes mothers, and if you notice, I'm trying not to speak absolutely.
Right.
Uh, Sometimes mothers don't have a diverse skill set to pull from to shift up their parenting as they grow.
Mm-hmm.
So you're trying to sometimes we try to parent teenagers and young adults the same way we parent children.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're going to have a power conflict. Now you're going to have all these unnecessary, you know, negative encounters and so forth. And I think that we sort of can avoid those if we could just really be intentional about developing our skill set in terms of parenting teenagers, young adults, and then adults. And so I was very intentional about that, which is one of the reasons why my relationship with my children is what it is. We talk about just about any and everything.
Yeah.
Uh, I know I made a couple of comical videos with my daughters talking about sex, which is something some fathers have a hard time accepting the sexual lives of their daughters. Now they'll accept the sexual lives of their sons,
Right.
but with their daughters, they're having some kind of, and I'm gonna be honest with you, as my daughters grew, I grew with them
Mm-hmm.
because I remember my ex and I having this conversation. She was like, "Oh, you are a certain way with your sons. You're letting them date, but when your daughters get older, I'm looking at them. They're like little girls at that time, and I'm like, oh no, they won't be dating.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they're gonna dedicate their life to the Lord. They're gonna I couldn't imagine them dating.
Right.
But as my daughters grew, I grew with them, and I became accepting of them as human beings and their sexual and private lives and their privacy, and I respected all of that. But I grew, and I have positions and orientations that I think about, like I would never have thought that I would be so what I guess most would call liberal.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really for me, it's a respect. It's a respect for them as people,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Yeah.
How do you think that? I mean, how did you grow to be that person? Because I'm thinking about the fact that I have three teenagers. The youngest is 13, and then I have the 16-year-old twins. And I know the challenges that I have, particularly as, I'm the only adult in the house. And
Yes.
my co-parenting situation is not what I think it should be or what it could be.
Okay.
So, I admire um, parents who have the ability, though their relationship didn't work out, but they have the ability to set their egos aside and to set all of whatever happened in
Yeah.
between the two of them within the relationship, but they set that aside to co-parent, cohesively,
Right.
with their children. So for me, my struggle is because I feel like I'm one person, but I've got to try to find the balance. Like I've got to be the nurturer, but then I've got to be the disciplinarian. So I feel like I'm Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, depending on, split
Right.
personalities over here. So what advice can you give, especially a father? Because I couldn't imagine. I mean, I was married and pregnant before I think my father probably was like, oh, okay.
Like, hey.
always looked at me as his little girl, and
That's
I'm
right.
not the other
That's right.
way. So I never, and we had a very interesting relationship. So how do you grow to into becoming that type of parent where you do actually look at your children as human beings and give them the respect? Because you're right. I definitely grew up in an authoritative household.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
as I say, not as I do,
Mhm.
But how do you get to that point?
The first, well, first we're gonna say it. Like, I'm gonna be honest with you. You have to pray hard.
Mhm,
But it's a specific type of supplication and prayer.
mhm,
And you ask God to expand not just your heart for loving, but expand your understanding,
mhm,
because we have to mature and grow. And then with that, the second one is connected to that. That is, you have to learn to interrogate your ideological commitments, because some of them are off.
yeah.
Some of the ideas you have about power, like, I don't have to respect a child. That's crazy. Why? Because the person is dependent on you. The person's smaller than you. The person doesn't have as much money as you. I mean, look at the lesson you're teaching about power.
Mhm,
So we have to build the capacity to question all of those ideological constructions that were given to us by our parents, by
mhm,
our religious leaders. But you have to learn to question all of that. And then you find out from your own scrutiny interrogation what works for you and what's good for you. And for me, I want to be just. I don't want to be a hypocrite.
mhm,
See, I want to be just. I don't care who you are. I give justice. And if I am doing something that is unjust, then of course I'm going to go back and read. I remember one time I punished one of my kids. I accused them of doing something. You know how you know your children,
mhm,
and you like, yeah, I know you did this. It was one of those situations. In this situation, I was wrong.
mhm.
I accused my son of doing something he did not do, and I whooped him. You know, and then when I found the evidence that he didn't do it, I was like, I went back and I was like, I'm sorry, but you did something I didn't know about. So, but I apologize. I was so apologetic. Like, son, I don't ever want to punish you for something you did not do. I'm sorry. That is wrong. In the same way, we would not want someone to be prosecuted for something and punished for something they did not do. It's the same principle of justice. And so, with that, I always give what I would want. You want for your brother, sister, what you want. And your children, yes, they're your children, but in the eyes of God, they're your little brothers and sisters, right? And I remember being in power dynamics that were unjust. And
Mhm,
I remember saying, I'm never, if I ever have power, I will never use it that way.
mhm,
I've been under authoritarian power. My mother was not an authoritarian. She was a very loving and um, nurturing parent, which is probably where I get most of this from.
mhm,
She always would talk to you and listen. And, so that's the kind of parent I wanted to talk and listen. And with that, that allowed me to grow with my kids,
mhm,
constantly talking to them. As a matter of sometimes, Gina,
mhm.
my kids be like, just whoop me. Can you please stop talking? I talk too much. Just please. Like but one of the things that my kids can tell you is that if nothing else, my father listens to me. And let me say this, and when my kids are full of
Mhm.
stuffing,
Right.
I have no problem telling them straight up, you are full of stuffing. And
Mhm,
I was like, now you can't say no one told you, because I just told. Now that's the other side of it.
mhm,
And I've always been like that with my children. I talk straight.
mhm,
And when they're doing little mental tricks and lying to themselves, I tell them to their faces, you are being dishonest to you.
mhm,
And so I think that has facilitated the kind of really open relationships that we've had with each other. We've had some tough times, they are people, and they're not me, so we clash a lot. But I think that just having the foundation, that capacity to talk, again, prayer, you have to pray to something beyond you to expand you, because you don't know it all and you are not always correct. Even if you believe something to be true 1000%, you may not be correct. So this is why you have to have that connection. And then secondly, of course, interrogate, have the capacity to question some of the things that you're holding to be true.
You have some wisdom today, Mr. Muhammad.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That all praises to God.
And I think that the information that you're sharing, the knowledge that you're sharing, actually, I mean, it's applicable across the board. And it makes, I hope it makes one reflective of the relationship that they're developing with their children, or that they currently have with their children. Because, I'm thinking about how most of us, we either grow up to emulate the parenting that we received,
Mm.
we work diligently to not replicate the parenting that we receive. So it's going to be one or the other. Um, and I can remember, saying, I think I do have a little bit of a balance, just a little bit, I will tell my children that I pay the bills around here. Now, at least you can do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's a common. But what I've noticed, I don't know if it's this pandemic that since we've been all together since March 13th, but my daughter in particular, Aaliyah, has grown to become so comfortable with, she will send me a meme and a TikTok video in a minute talking about parenting. And,
Oh, Lord.
and I can actually laugh at it.
Right.
And my son Kamal, her twin brother, I remember him saying to me one day, he was like, do you have to always be so serious? Can you just laugh sometimes? And, it's just a joke. He keeps to himself because he's in a house full of females. And I do feel sorry for him because of that. But he's the one, like, he'll kind of joke around with me. And I'm like always serious, because that's the type of household I grew up in. My father was, you didn't joke with your parents.
You don't play with your parents. Don't play. Let me tell you, I'm a frustrated comedian. So I work out all my material on my children because they're a captive audience. They gotta listen, and they better laugh. No, but I think we demonstrate a lot of things to our children. We demonstrate how to love, but we also can demonstrate how to be witty and funny. Loosen up. A lot of times, our parents and our grandparents did not have the luxury of showing vulnerability and being funny because of the kind of racist, heterosexist, patriarchal world they lived in.
Right.
Which had a lot of crazy ideological commitments that were toxic and unhealthy. Okay. We do not live in that world today. That world is changing. And guess what? That means you have the luxury. You can share with your children how to be witty, how to use sarcasm and to be funny. Like we actually teach a lot of ways, even how to be joyful. And that's one of the things that I learned from my mother. My mother, I remember Sunday morning, she would have the house smelling like pine saw, and she would be cooking breakfast, playing her gospel music. That just taught me how to be. So when I'm cleaning up around the house, sure enough, I'm throwing my gospel music. I got and I'm teaching I'm modeling for my children when it's time to clean up. That's a joyful time. That it's a meditative exercise to clean up. And some of my children picked up on that. Some of them didn't.
I have about a few over here.
Yeah, my daughters, and I'm gonna give them props. My daughters, and I know my next eldest son Jamil gets this too. When they're cleaning up, they created a mood and an environment. And I know that they have picked that up for myself and their mom. Yeah.
So let's kind of talk about when you and your wife decided that you would separate. I don't know how many years ago was that? Like, were the children adult? I mean, because at the ages we're looking at.
Let me tell you, it's been over 3 years. And when we decide when we actually split, because just because you decide, okay, let's go, and it's like then you look at your wallet and you're like, okay, we might have to stay together just a little longer. But it's been 3 years at least, maybe three and a half. And my sons, my eldest son, sat me down and they told me this. This is why I am so grateful to be their father.
Mm-hmm.
Them boys sat me, and they had to be in high school, and they said, if you are staying for us,
Mm-hmm.
we are giving you permission to leave.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be okay. But this that you two are doing
Mm-hmm.
is not good for any of us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, these are your children. You talk about wisdom coming from the mouths of babes. Here's are my children eliminating all excuses for me to stay in a situation that was not good for me and my wife. We were not good together.
Mm-hmm.
We're great people,
Right.
apart, wonderful friends. That's my girl. But together we had grown too far apart.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and so to have your children tell you now, the younger kids did struggle. The younger children, they didn't understand. But even as they got older, and we always talk things through. We all are always debriefing things together.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to express some things. They're like, yeah, I thought it was going to be like this, but it wasn't. So it's not that bad. And I was like, yeah, I thought it was going to be terrible too. I thought, but
Yeah.
again, I'm very grateful for how things are working out for us.
Would you, is it safe to say then that that was the reason that you and your wife stayed together as long as you did, was because of the children, for the sake of the children?
That was a tremendous impetus for us because of our values.
Mm-hmm.
We did not want to do something to damage our kids, which is ironic, right? Because our stand together could have been a bit harming. But
Right.
nevertheless, and we knew that, and we knew that how we split was going to be very important, and even how we related and dealt with things with the kids. And I'm gonna be honest with you, that was probably the easiest part, the parenting part. Supporting supporting the kids was never an issue,
Mm-hmm.
and again, as a Muslim man, that's something that, we were and that was just instilled in us, that you as a Muslim, there should be no problem with you supporting your ex and those children.
Right.
And so I proceeded with our separation agreement. I proceeded with that understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And I had peace. Unlike some brothers who,
Who had,
maybe all that privilege, they don't have peace. I did the just thing.
right.
I had peace. I bear witness.
Yes. And you absolutely should be just, because if you are, absolutely, you will have peace. However,
Yes.
when you do not go down that road.
No. The Minister Farrakhan said that years ago. Now he said, brothers, he said, some of you, he said, these sisters, they leave you. He said, he's like, send them away with a nice gift, a merciful gift. I'm like, be compassionate. I was like, that always stuck with me as a young man. Like, that's the kind of man I want to be. Like, you break up with me, it's like, okay, sweetie, no problem. Here you go. This, I just thought that was just like a very kind of honorable way to split, instead of being, we are so dishonorable in how we dissolve our relationships.
Yeah. And that also will have an impact, obviously, on your children. As you were
Yeah,
talking about how your sons sat you all down, sat the two of you all down.
yeah.
It was actually because I was married for 11 years. I've been
Oh,
divorced for 7.
Wow. Okay.
So my I always, trying to do the math here. So that means that my youngest was 6 years old, I think.
Hmm.
Yeah. And the twins were 9.
Okay.
But I stayed in a marriage longer than I should have because I had children, number one. I mean, for the same reasons. I didn't want my children to grow up in a single parent household. I didn't want them going back and forth between different households. I
Right.
I was blessed and fortunate to have my parents together until the day my father passed away, you know? And so for me, I remained in a marriage where I was not happy, and my children were witness of my lack of happiness,
Yeah.
probably their father's lack of happiness as well. Neither one of us were happy, and all for the sake of so that you could say you have them in a two-parent home, but then they're
Yep.
able to see what a healthy partnership looks like when
Right.
you're in a toxic relationship. So you have to ask yourself, when is enough enough?
Yeah.
And I got to the point where it was I had taken about all that I, could.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I actually knew very early on in my marriage
Yeah.
that it was not the best decision to be in the marriage, but because of, and my mom and I, we talk about this because she didn't want her baby girls. I had infants.
Right. Yes.
What do you mean?
Like no.
Who gonna do with those babies?
Because we're taught some things like, hey, your marriage is comparable to your religious relationship, your spiritual relationship with Allah, and there is some truth, but that's not an absolute. What you need to be is just. So even when you split, be just. Whatever you do, be just. Even when you get married, be just. When you get divorced, be just. But we're thinking, oh, if I get divorced or if I dissolve this relationship, then I am committing this kind of cardinal sin, and that is not true at all.
Mhm.
And so I think if you divorce and you're unjust, now that might be a sin. And I think we should be open to that. We cling to these ideas and we don't question them. And I don't know if they lead to the best results.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So, what do you, as a father who has just this open line of communication with all of your children, right? Um, what do you think? What would you say has been the greatest sense of accomplishment as a father?
I think that showing my children an example of vulnerable leadership. Like I apologize to my children,
Mm-hmm.
and I tell them, I'm like, I don't have to apologize to you. Like I need you to be clear. I don't have to. I do it because it's the right thing to do, and I have to respect you, even though you are my dependent.
Mm-hmm.
You are in my house, sitting on my couch,
Mm-hmm.
sucking up my heat and air conditioning. I still, when I am wrong,
Mm-hmm.
I will apologize to you, which, I get very angry with them when they can't apologize to each other. Cause I'm like, I don't understand that. Now I can apologize to you, right? And you accept that and you're okay with that. You see the beauty of that. But you apologize to each other, you're gonna hold a grudge. Really?
Mm-hmm.
Really? And I'm showing you the example
Mm-hmm.
of how to be loving and forgiving, even when you have the power and sometimes even the moral high ground,
Mm-hmm.
you still can be loving. So I think that's one of the things that I think I'm very proud of, actually, being very intentional about exemplifying that.
Mm-hmm.
That again, I'm in a leadership position. I have power. And as parents, we often have absolute power to do what we want. But yeah, I'm going to choose to be just,
Mm-hmm.
merciful, and loving So, I think they have, as they mature, they really appreciate it, because they understand it, what that is. Like, wow, he did not. He could have just told me to go to hell.
Mhm.
I don't know if I can say that on here, but whatever. Um, to Hades. But he didn't. He really, just told me, "Hey, I'm sorry." And I've said, my children, we've had arguments, and there's been tears and crying. And trust me, it hasn't all been,
Mhm.
um, flowers and hugs. But one of the things that I appreciate is that we have the kinds of relationship where we can talk straightforward about our feelings, and we can, even when we've made mistakes, we can come to each other and say, listen, I went too far when
Mhm.
I said XYZ, and I'm sorry, I apologize. That And I always go back to this fundamental principle. You always go back to your love for them.
Mhm.
Young people, our children in particular, will take a lot from us when they know where we're coming from. Sometimes we're coming from love, but sometimes we're coming from some other places. And children are very good at picking up on that.
Yeah.
And they won't receive the discipline you're trying to give them when they determine that you're not really coming from love, you coming from somewhere else.
Mhm.
So you have to be clear that you're coming from a place of love, and they'll receive the discipline from you when you are demonstrating that you're coming from love.
Maybe you need to teach a parenting class, Eugene.
Oh wow! I don't know.
I mean,
Like I said, I guess the curriculum will be all my mistakes. Because as parents, that's how we learn. And my daughters and I talk to them about cycles and breaking cycles.
yeah.
And I tell them that you have a lot of power to break cycles, but be also aware of the cycles that you are institutionalizing. And
Mhm.
as you go on to formulate and form your own families, be clear on the cycles that you are creating. Um,
What
yeah.
would you say, speaking of that, what would you say is the cycle that you've broken from the way, can you talk about that?
Yes. Yes. I think
To be
I,
mad.
I'm a I'm a recovering sexist.
I-
So there was some, yeah, I'm a recovering sexist. I'm a recovering heterosexist even.
okay.
Um, what will you do if one of your children or a couple of your children come out to you and tell you that, you know, I'm gay, I'm lesbian, I'm queer,
Mhm.
Um, and, I've had to face that in my life, and I have responded by the grace of Allah in a way that I've shocked myself. I didn't even know. But again, I've grown with my children.
Mhm.
And some of my ideological commitments are not worth, they're just not worth committing it
Yeah.
to them.
Yeah.
And, I make it clear. I told one of my kids who came out to me,
Mhm.
I told them, I said, I don't care what the world says. I love you, and
Mhm.
I will fight heaven, earth, and everything in between on your behalf.
Mhm.
So, so now we clear where my commitment is. My commitment is, see, and that's what I meant by I love like a mother.
Yeah.
In that regard, if we're going, I love like a mom in that, like, man, I'm ride or die. And I tell my kids, you only have one ride or die, and that's your mom.
Mhm.
But I also tell them that, look, don't count your dad out in that. I might not be like her,
Yeah.
because mothers, I'm gonna say, mothers are the only ones that will be at the press conference when they come out that you have murdered through 20 people and have eaten 10 of them. Mothers are the only ones that'll be like, that's still my baby. Now, daddy are gonna be like, I don't know him. I don't know. I need a paternity test, but mom will be there talking about that's my baby. Give him mercy.
Yeah.
And so, but hey, don't count me out for that. But I think that kind of loving disposition has challenged me
Mhm.
to grow as a father.
Mhm.
I never thought that I would, have the capacity to to develop my understanding of, again, back to human sexuality. These are things that we've attempted to control in a variety of ways.
Mhm.
And now we're being faced with the fact that, not all of us, and so now, we live in a world where our young people can express themselves and, hopefully be themselves without being the victims of various forms of violence.
Mhm.
And we have often participated, even as parents, we've participated in that violence. And I'm very grateful for the growth that God has given me, spiritually, intellectually.
Mhm.
And I'm grateful for the relationships that I can have with all of my children, regardless of their sexual orientation, regardless of their gender, et cetera. And I think that for the most part, I've been able to be a just father.
Mhm.
I wasn't, like, you let the boys date, but you wouldn't let us date. I've been very reasonable in that regard. And it's been difficult because they still your babies, right? So I would meet my daughters will introduce me to young guys and, I would question them, but I wasn't, how we like, if somebody want to date my daughter, I'm going to answer the door with a gun. I didn't do all that. I answered the door with a sword, like any reasonable. And so, no, I'm just kidding. I didn't do that. So that I would have to say that's my greatest accomplishment. Again, one of my kids came out to me,
Mhm.
and and I thought it was interesting because their mother, she's a little more conservative, or was more conservative in that regard, and then I was like, I don't know, son. I don't know how you gonna tell your mom. I don't know. That's gonna be tough, right?
So you all just agreed that as far as parenting, since you all were friends before you got married, you just decided in the best interest of the children, we continue to, put them first, take care of them, but just
Yeah, because so much of our life has been about that. Even how we set up, we set up our family. Like I pretty much was the breadwinner. She was a homemaker,
Mhm.
and I did everything in my power to make sure she didn't have to work. When she worked, she wanted to work, just to find something to do. But we want to make sure, especially in those formative years, that one of us was dedicated
Mhm.
to their growth, development, and their security.
Okay.
That was something that was very important to us. We made sure that we basically had our own little safe enclave for our kids. We wouldn't let them, like, our kids didn't spend the night over people's homes
Mhm.
like that when they didn't realize that those were security measures. My wife was always there in the school watching, and that was something we were very intentional about. So that commitment to the children, their security, their growth, and their development is something that we continue even to this day, even as, of course, we're no longer together.
Mhm. Do you think so? Did you all here's something, and I'm kind of jumping around because
No, that's fine.
as you're making these statements, it's making me think of some things. But so let's just backtrack 26 and a half, 27 years ago, right? When
Right.
you discovered that you're about to be a parent, you all 19, 20, whatever the ages were. Did you all sit down and talk about how you were going to parent? I'm going to assume not because you are
Wait,
young.
wait. This is the funniest thing ever. So when we found out she was pregnant,
Uh-huh.
okay, we decided, well, we're gonna go to Planned Parenthood so we can plan on being parents. So we showed up to Planned Parenthood like, okay, what programs do you all have to help us be good parents? And they were like, yeah, that's not what we do here at Planned Parenthood.
Got it all wrong.
We left there very confused. We were like, well, why do they name it Planned Parenthood? Yeah, so we were very intentional about informing ourselves. I remember we used to listen to this wonderful Christian ministry.
Mhm.
Um, I forgot what was the name of it, but they used to give a lot of information on parenting. They used to give a lot of information on vaccinations.
Okay.
Um, and I forget the name of it. It was a very popular Christian radio show. But
Mhm.
we would look for sources. We of course had books on parenting. We were not playing. We were intentional about being good parents, and we particularly did not want to make the mistakes, of course, that some of our grandparents and parents had made, but we also wanted to make sure that we were going to set our kids up for better opportunities than we had.
Yeah.
So, but I remember that showing up to Planned Parenthood, we were ready, boy. We were like, we had our little file. We were going, yeah.
Really funny.
Mhm.
Well, I really do thank you for just enlightening us, because it sounds like, I mean, just listening to you talk, and I've said this to you since I've known you. I know that your children are your pride and joy. Like, they are very, important. So listening to you talk about the joy of being a father honestly is, I don't want to say it's very refreshing, because I do know fathers who truly, value that role.
Yeah.
But when that's not the narrative that's painted for Black men, I think it's so important for that to be highlighted. And that's
Yeah.
the reason why I'm doing this series, because I want people to see that just because the parents aren't together, I mean, I think black men are probably the most involved in terms of, fathers, whether it's sports, it's making sure that they're coaching their child's team or what have you, or just being present. Again, just because you're not in the same household does not mean that you can't be present in your child's life and make an impact.
Let me say this, and thank you. You remake me. I want to say this controversial, so it's good to say it at the end. Um, I would say that my children are my best friends. And that's one of the reasons I tell my wife this.
Mhm.
I tell her that, I'm so grateful for her because she has given me my best friends. Now, there are many, I say this is controversial because there are many philosophical ideas about parenting that you can't be friends with your children. And I completely disagree with that.
Mhm.
In the same way that God could walk and talk to Abraham as a friend, I don't see how you and I are so great
Right.
that we can't walk as friends. That doesn't mean that there's a difference. Yes, there's a power um, uh, difference there. The power differential, however, still maintains the kind of this kind of love, what the philos, like philosophy, philia, this familial love that and bond that should be there. So in that sense, no, we absolutely are friends. I'm just blessed to be your predecessor, and I'm blessed to be your progenitor. And I view that as, a very honorable service position. That's how I started with this. And so in that sense, I think that, it allows me to appreciate their mother
Mhm.
for blessing me with my best friends. And they are, just because I have a little power and authority over them,
Mhm.
that's all. And it's my job to be just as I exercise that power and authority over them. So yeah.
Mr. Muhammad, the philosopher, it has been a pleasure.
Yes, yes, this has been beautiful.
It really has. So I thank you so very much. I don't know if you have any, you got any closing words of wisdom that you want to share, perhaps with fathers who may be in the midst of, going through a transition where perhaps there's, contemplating separating, or they're in the midst of it, in terms of how they can, ensure that co-parenting relationship is intact, and the relationship
Yes.
with their children are intact.
Yes. I think the one thing I would suggest to any brother that's dealing with any of those troubling times or any vicissitude that they'll be faced with is to keep love at the core. I think that Christian message and ethic is so powerful. In everything that you do it lovingly. Even if you are splitting, do it lovingly. Even if you're disciplining your children, do it lovingly. With all things, do it out of love and you'll be fine. I think that's yeah.
And I wouldn't do my audience justice if I don't ask you, dear brother, to provide some words of wisdom for those mothers who are
I knew
embarking.
that was coming. I knew that was coming. And for the sisters, I would strongly suggest, just as we know that you all are the backbone of our families, you are the children's ride or die. They don't have another ride or die. I would only suggest that you diversify your parenting repertoire with a variety of skills so that you can shift up your parenting strategy and approach as your children go from being children to teens to young adults to adults. And that's probably, I think, the main ingredient to kind of having some really great, smooth continuity with the parenting for sisters. I would definitely suggest and share that with them.
Well, there have been times that I've had to seek counsel with you. Now, how should I do this?
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I appreciate that though, and I appreciate you,
Thank you.
for joining me, for sharing words of wisdom. This has really been a great show.
Yeah.
So thank you so very much for joining me for this segment.
Thank you, Dr. Muhammad. Thank you.
And maybe you can come on again. We'll talk about education because I know you've made some controversial statements about education, and I know that's your thing. So
Oh yeah.
we need to make sure we get you back on the podcast during season 2, because this first season is winding down as 2020 is finally coming to it.
Oh yeah. Oh.
Back on so that we could talk about education as well.
I
So
would love that. I would love that.
awesome. So thank you everyone for tuning in this week for Light It Up. I hope you join me next week for another very interesting guest. We'll be wrapping up the series on Black fathers and Black fatherhood. Also, don't forget, if you have not already done so, make sure you subscribe to Light It Up. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and then you can also listen to the podcast on Apple Music, Google Play, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. So, as always, make sure that you continue to light it up and shine bright like a diamond. Thanks for joining me this week on Light It Up. Make sure you visit my website at www.lightituppodcast.com or www.aginahmuhammad.com. You can also find me on social media using the handle @LightItUpPodcast. If you like what you've heard, please be sure to hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, I'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or you can simply tell a friend about the show. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a new episode. Until next time, light it up and shine bright like a diamond.